And so she introduces the principle for test the idol. Does it contradict itself? By looking at an extreme form of empiricism within academia that had a huge overthrow, which was logical positivism. And so this
is huge, especially during the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
I mean, just huge. Everybody kind of bought into this. And, this was the way to go. It's how really they justified Darwinianism. They justified leaving all kinds of metaphysical statements out of philosophy. I mean, this was huge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, William Lane Craig says this overthrow was the most important philosophical event of the 20th century. So pretty important. Logical positivists puts everything in a box of the senses. Any statement that cannot be traced back to the sense impression is rejected as false. So as Tony was saying, as these metaphysical claims, that they're hard, they're icky. We kind of want to do away with them. So let's say that it's not a sense impression. We can reject it. Good. Check. So logical positives took this claim a step further. It insisted that any statement not reducible to sense impressions is not just false, but cognitively misleading. That is not even subject to standards of true and false. So when we say
so it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
If you say God exists, well, God is non-physical, and therefore you can't sense God, and therefore the statement doesn't have any meaning.
Right.
That's what they were getting at.
Right. The character Cornswall feels feels soft. Or feels gobbledygook. That's exactly what it is. It is gobbledygook. It doesn't. It's not even true or false. It's you're using terminology that they can't even. I don't even understand what that means. Would probably come out of them. So
think of all the things that are non-physical, right? She gives some examples.
Yeah, slavery is unjust. Well, that I can feel that. I can test that. I know what justice feels like, and I can hold slavery in my other hand. And here, justice falls. I'm sorry, justice is heavier. So.
Clearly, justice can't be, felt, taste, touched, heard,
right,
or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
So even having that conversation. Yeah. Even having that conversation, you can. It goes down to what she says here is that it reduces moral statements to expressions of emotions like boo, hooray, or icky. It's the icky feel. Well, slavery is just icky to me. Okay, but is it wrong? Well, I don't even know what you're talking about. So you can never have these moral claims in here because they're not sense impressions. This view of morality has percolated through all levels of society. After all, it's much easier to dismiss someone's views by saying that's just a value judgment and treating it as subjective preference instead of examining it seriously as a valid candidate for truth. Which is yes, you're right. It's definitely easier. You're just using Christianity just uses a subjective standard. You're just using a subjective God. That's not really what subjective means.
It's how you feel. Some of this came to be known as emotivism.
Right. Yeah.
I don't like or I don't feel good about murder. Not that it's right or wrong. It's just I don't feel good about it.
Which definitely hasn't carried over in today's school of thoughts at all. So that's good thing we got rid of that. So what happened to logical positivism when applied to itself? Its central claim was the statements are meaningful only if they're empirically testable. Can you titrate it? Can you do a scratch test? Can you hit it with a hammer, see if it's malleable? Okay, so if the statement that anything is meaningful is only if the statement of logical positivism is only meaningful if it's empirically tested, is that true? Is that statement itself empirically testable? Well, of course not. It's not an empirical observation that empiricism is an entirely
statement, right?
Yeah, right. Entirely. Yep. It is a metaphysical rule, an arbitrary definition of what qualifies as knowledge. Thus, when the criterion of logical positivism was applied to itself, it was discredited. It stood self-condemned. It hung itself. It slit its own throat. When applied to itself, logical positivists lost. And so This isn't a mere rhetorical trick. It's a powerful tool for testing truth claims. And that's true because, what they're applying to you as a universal statement should also be applicable to their own standard, because they're saying all of this is like this. Okay, is that also what you're saying? Can that meet the same standard? So, I can universally say that there's absolutely no universal truth. Okay, well, is that statement a universal truth? No. Okay, well then you're wrong.
How can you say it?
Yeah, how can you say that? Or yes,
it's false.
Which then it collapses on itself, because you do have one. And so there are ways that she's going to get through to say that these angelic beings came and we can stand above and look down upon the peons and say, ha ha, look what I found. So we'll get into that a little bit later.
And really what she's trying to show here is that by pointing this self-referentially incoherent issue out is not just a rhetorical trick. It's an important philosophical way of evaluating statements and worldviews and theories.
Right. It's not arguing over definitions where you're like, you probably mean this word. And so you're like, haha, look, I've got you to reverse your position, because you're like, yeah, maybe I mean that word a little bit more than I mean this word. It's not something like that. It's to test itself, to put whatever they're saying should be the case under the weight of itself. Can it stand on its own grounds? Can it explain itself?